You're with Julian on the Brown Note and a review of The Purple Bird by Bonnie Prince Billy. And this is a very interesting review for me, as Will Oldham, aka Bonnie Prince Billy, is a songwriting god, also a part-time actor, with an impeccable discography going back to the early 90s when he recorded under variations of the word Palace. I think it's Palace Brothers, Palace Music, where he said quite rightly that each album was being made with a revolving cast of people, so calling it one band name it was inaccurate because it was always a different group of people. And towards the end of that decade, he introduced the moniker Bonnie Prince Billy, which has become his most used name in releasing music ever since. And the album that he released around 1999, I think, I See a Darkness, is one of my all-time favourites. It's a 10 out of 10 album. And like another 10 out of 10 indie breakthrough album from that year, In the Aeroplane Over the Sea, it has its own language. There's not really anything else quite like it musically or lyrically. And since then, he's just been a very consistently great singer-songwriter. So the fact that I absolutely detest this album is quite something. I haven't noted any reviews on it. I haven't read any review of it at all. So I am kind of fascinated by what other people think about this, because I hate it. The main thing that he does here is he goes very, very straightforward commercial modern country pop, which is not like his music at all. And unfortunately, he brings in the same kind of broad lyricism that goes along with that kind of music, as well as the very unimaginative instrumentation and very rote, predictable song progressions on this one. So I'm not sure where he's coming from on this album. 30th studio album. And it's got 84 and on Metacritic, identifying universal acclaim. That to me is utterly baffling. I've got a lot to say about this album. The opening track, Turn to Dust, Rolling On, actually features the lyric, Can't we all just get along? And that's indicative of the broad strokes this often genius lyricist. And I just want to go back actually before I start. The music that he's made lately has been slept on. He's absolutely releasing some of the best stuff he's done. The Bill Callahan joint album, another singer-songwriter that's very in his pocket. Blind Date Party, a double album of covers, was fantastic. But Super Wolves with Matt Sweeney, the sequel to the Super Wolf album from about 15 years before, one of the best albums of the last 10 years. In fact, that album is the exact opposite of this album in every way. Lyrically, the imaginative arrangements and unusual instrumentation, and the songwriting just being on another level. The lyricism here is often very, very broad, to the extent it's cringe-inducing. Can't we all just get along? Won't be long till we're gone. I don't know if John Squire stepped in to write some of these. It's so close to like trite, meaning well, modern commercial country, that I struggled not to take it as that music, even though I knew who was making it. London May, the second track, is pleasingly darker, less trite, and also in a lower key, not quite so sort of obvious and shiny. And it's got more interesting musical embellishments. But the female backing on some of these tracks is actually quite aggravating. Very much like commercial country music, where it's almost like the backing vocals on an Oasis track where they just repeat stuff. I think if you want to understand why I hate this album so much, Tonight with the Dogs I'm Sleeping is the worst Will Oldham song I've ever heard. It's unbearably honky-tonk. He almost sounds uncomfortable singing it. And it's got a lyricism and a lyrical angle which is pervasive through this album, which is close to the boomer memes, oh, my wife, I've got a wife I hate sort of boomer memes. Like his evocation of an angry woman at home waiting for him while he's down the pub was on the nose, actually. It might be the worst thing he's done. It's like a local pub line dancing band. She Gets This Way. Like a lot of the lyrics to that song are very on the nose. The fourth track, Boise, Idaho. I love the name Boise. It's a beautiful word and it fits really well with Idaho. And it's so lovely, it doesn't really matter what's going on in it. It's a really lovely ballad. And the starker tracks on here are the only ones that I could actually stomach. It's one of the only ones that was almost as stark as something off of I See a Darkness. And the female backing here is better as well. I thought that was probably the best track so far. The water's fine. There's a lot of water in this album. There's a lot of Christian sort of imagery and metaphor, and a lot of that is based around water, which goes on throughout the whole album. It's got a more appealing, if you're going to go road country, this has got a more bluegrass bayou sound rather than that very generic sheen, which I thought was a lot better. And it's also got this vibe which is a little bit more like it could have been on the soundtrack to something like Smokey and the Bandit. So that was another track that stood out. Morally, this album leaves me a bit questioning as well. I mean, there's this broad universality to it that waters down any intent. I don't know whether this song is being Christian or whether it's about appeasement, but stuff like "We must have love for those against us." There's a lot in this song that goes on about how, you know, everyone must be forgiven, and no, they shouldn't, really. There's a lot of bad people doing very bad shit now. We shouldn't just welcome them all with open arms, as this song suggests. It's just, again, and it feels half-assed as well. Water comes back again with new water, and it's very anonymous. Now, the track "Guns Are for Cowards" is completely one of the most baffling things I have ever heard. I'm going to try and bring up the lyrics. Given the album as a whole, and even the song on its own, it's so out of place on this record. It's almost like he's being forced to make a modern country pop album and has decided to put in the song that will antagonize that bass the most. The lyrics are, who would you and it's got this very incongruous German Oompa Loompa music, which is completely at odds with the lyrics, which are often pretty full on. Who would you shoot in the face? Who would you shoot in the brain? Who would you shoot in the back and leave bleeding out in the rain? Who would you shoot in the leg? How many times in the neck? And who would you shoot, and how would you feel, exalted or destroyed? And then it gets personal in a manner that is completely out of place on this album. Well, I had a friend who was shot 7 times as she tried, scared, to run away. She couldn't scream, her mouth had been shot, and now she's not with us today. And it's such a bleak and personal moment. It has no business being here. And it's almost like, you know, putting a satanic track in the middle of a Christian album. It is completely baffling that where he was going on this song. And even though I wanted to like it for being so outrageous, the German Oompa Loompa music makes it very, very difficult not to hate it musically. It's a glimpse of what could have been, which is taking the modern country palette and just blowing it up, as he does on one track. It's an incredible moment of self-sabotage. Was he forced to make this album? More water on Downstream. Again, it's just anonymous and a very sloppy vocal. from John Anderson, who does a co-lead vocal. Sounds like something off a Braveheart soundtrack. One of these days I'm going to spend the whole night with you. Again, it's a lot on the nose, and it has a lot to do with, about how he's going to convert this friendship he has with a woman into sex as a reward, is what I read it as. I don't know where who invented this. Is Will Oldham being kidnapped? It's again very on the nose, but the music sounds like a Tikka bar house band, which could be great, but it feels like that 70s ballad, She's Having My Baby. What a beautiful way of saying I love you. It's My Living in Vain, I thought was probably the best track. Very stark, almost Nina Simone-ish, and almost quite ghostly. I thought that was good. And then we get Our Home, which is a super trite hoedown. And its whole ethos is celebrating a man in the country building his own home and rejecting machinery to do so. Which again is so broad and so trite. I just don't know where Will Oldham... Maybe he just wanted to try making this album, and he's a restless soul with an impeccable discography going back 3 decades. I think this album is horrible, and I don't understand how it's got an average of 8.4 out of 10 from people. There is so much here that's on the nose, thematically, lyrically, musically, arrangements-wise, instrumentationally, progression of songs that suck so hard. And such a lot that's in this era where everyone's very, very touchy about things. Such a lot of on-the-nose takes on things combined with almost like Gal Gadot doing Imagine level broadness and triteness. So the worst project I've ever heard from Will Oldham, aka Bonnie Prince Billy, the Purple Bird, and an anomaly in a classic discography from one of America's greatest songwriters of the modern era, who is the apex of Appalachian man. If you ever think in your head, and this is very offensive, of someone cooking meth in a Catskill mansion in Catskill Mountains with a F-100 pickup truck and a black dog in the back and a hunting rifle in a case, that's the guy. Not saying that everyone in the Catskill Mountains cooks meth, just most people. So the Purple Bird, I'm going to give a terrible 3 out of 10. Probably 3 tracks on this album that I kind of liked, but the overall experience was one of shock and horror. 3 out of 10 for the Purple Bird.